So today I'm going to be watching this video. It's called Trade Tariff Turmoil Pushes Canada to Rethink US Ties. And of course I've seen videos recently about this. I've been watching on the channel things like Canadians boycotting travel to the US, Canadians boycotting American made products and just buying Canadian, traveling within Canada. And that's not even like the government, that's just the Canadian people making that decision, which is very strong. I like it. The title I seen on this video but was Canada looking more to become part of EU, but maybe not become part of EU, but to just strengthen ties with Europe, which makes sense. I have seen people in the comments talk about they'd rather join the EU. Is that ever a possibility, man? That'd be pretty cool. Even though being British, my fellow country people stupidly voted to exit the EU. I didn't do that, of course. I want free travel. I want like free travel around Europe, but yeah, interested to see how this is progressing. This is a bit of a longer one, so interested to get a deeper dive into the situation. Tell me what you think about it.
We begin the day with Trump's tariff threats and the political consequences. Recently, when U.S. President Donald Trump imposed and then suspended tariffs on all Canadian products, it got many there thinking, with friends like that, who needs enemies? Well, Canada's leaders are apparently rethinking their ties to the United States. They're turning to another partner, also targeted by Trump's tariffs, an ally on the other side of the Atlantic, the European Union. Canada's largest daily newspaper, the Toronto Star, has posed a question that not too long ago would have seemed fanciful. It ran with the headline, "Donald Trump drives a wedge between Canada and the U.S. with a trade war. Could we join the EU?" And it's not only the Toronto Star. The Economist has been pondering why Canada should join the EU. Europe needs space and resources. Canada needs people. Let's deal.
I didn't actually know it was this like far along. There was like articles about it and that sort of thing. Awesome, man. If that's a possibility. Again, I just feel envious that Britain voted to leave. I still want to be part of the EU as well. The thing about Canada needs people is good. That's one thing I feel like Britain's lost out on big time is high quality immigration from European countries. Like Europeans added a lot to the British economy, coming there, going there to work. A lot of very well educated people who can really add to the workforce, add to like the prosperity of the country. We lost out on all of that. If that's an option for Canada and we're able to somehow have that sort of free movement of people around between Europe and Canada and the other way, that's just beneficial to everybody. And like I said it before about these tariffs, it's like not only having like a sort of negative, not only not having a negative effect on the countries that they're trying to impose the tariffs, it's actually having a better effect. Like it's opening up a lot of new opportunities for these countries. Again, like I've said, not just the EU, but Trump's talked about negatively about Britain, about the EU, and I see people talking about from these regions and places not buying American-made products the same as Canadians. So really having like a galvanizing effect on like every other country, which is not the intended
leading voices
purpose,
in the European Union have also been getting behind it. European Parliament member Guy Verhofstadt posting on X, "We in Europe remember that Canadians died to liberate our continent. In the face of Trump's madness, the EU stands with Canada now. There is no reason why EU membership should be off the table."
Nice.
Well, now I'd like to play a clip for you where the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, speaks about standing up for Ukraine and the rules-based global order. But I'd like for you to pay particular attention to when he finishes making a statement and what he's asked by a reporter. Take a look.
Standing up for Ukraine is also standing up for the international rules-based order that protects us all and has led to extraordinary prosperity these past 8 decades. This is a moment for all of us to continue to stand together, and as friends and partners, that's exactly what we will always do. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Thank you.
Thank you. Merci.
We discuss tariffs.
We're going to discuss all sorts.
Including the
Would
tariffs.
Canada be better as the 28 EU member state or the US first?
All right, the voice that you heard there at the very end, that was our correspondent Jack Perrick. He joins me from Brussels, and Canadian political commentator Sean Mallon is also with us from Toronto. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Jack, let me start with you. Since you asked him about joining the EU, is it possible for Canada to become the 28th member of the European Union? And is that what Europe wants?
So it's not impossible, has been the response that I've had from EU officials after asking that question. It might have seemed a little bit sort of glib that I asked him whether it would be better for Canada to be the 28th EU member or the 51st state of the United States. But it really belies a pretty important discussion, which is where does Canada see itself in its place in the world related to the United States and related to the European Union. It was very clear from Trudeau's arrival here in Brussels that they feel very warmly towards the EU. Now, the officials that I've spoken to since say that basically it wouldn't be completely impossible for Canada to decide to submit an application to be an EU member state. That while EU member states have to be, it says in the text, a European country, that there is actually no definition of what a European country is in that context, so therefore it wouldn't be completely impossible.
And Sean, I know we're taking a tongue-in-cheek look at Canada joining the EU, but Canadians, they must be reflecting on their place in the world given what has happened over the past couple of weeks.
Oh, yes, and reflecting very much upon the nature of our relationship with our largest trading partner. I mean, it's important to understand that Canada exports something north of 75% of our goods and services to our neighbor to the south. But the recent events with Mr. Trump musing about 51st states, threatening tariffs, already imposing tariffs on steel and aluminum, it's caused a lot of self-reflection in Canada about how much this nation relies on exports to the United States for a variety of different ways, and it caused a lot of self-reflection within the country about trading within Canada, because oddly enough, there are substantial trade barriers between and among provinces as well. So it's been an issue that's gone on for decades, and suddenly is without much improvement, and suddenly a lot of discussion about how to improve those as well.
What's that? What, like you said, there's trade barriers between provinces. Why would that be, or what would they be? Has that been something that's held back, like the domestic economy in Canada? Like, is it difficult to trade between provinces? Does it vary between the different provinces as well? How difficult it can be?
Joining the EU. Well, I can't say that it's anywhere top of the agenda right now, but we live in odd times, don't we?
Yeah, we do live in odd times, yeah.
And I guess it's like not just joining the EU, it's just, like officially joining the EU, it can be just like strengthening ties, not being as reliant on the US, said what was that, 75% of exports. It's like maybe trying to export more to Europe as well to lessen the risk, just having so much of that trade with the US. So like this is, again, it's creating opportunities here, like for Canada.
You could put it that way, yeah. You know that the president, US President Donald Trump, he has proposed Canada become the 51st US state. Is there any appetite, Sean? Is there any appetite in Canada for that happening?
No significant appetite. The polls have it. So I think it's in the teens at best of anyone who would even consider it. You should know that, not to bore you with Canadian history, but this nation was formed in 1867 largely to avoid becoming annexed by the United States. So it's an integral part of Canadian identity to be not American, much as we rely on and are so closely tied to the United States of America. So no real appetite for it. And in fact, this recent musings by President Trump has caused an upsurge in Canadian nationalism, which is not part of the Canadian nature that much. People waving the flag more, a whole raft of Buy Canadian initiatives in grocery stores and all different kinds of forms of our economy.
Well, Sean, you know, Canada has no death penalty. It has gun controls, and it has universal health care like the U.S. or like Europe. But like the U.S., it is big sky country with big trucks as well. Are Canadians, do they see themselves as a bridge sometimes between the United States and the EU?
That's one way of looking at it. One of the irritants in Canada-U.S. trade relationships is that other nations, and the concern is obviously principally China, have tried to access the American market by bringing goods and services into Canada and then taking advantage of existing trade relationships, which Mr. Trump seems to be prepared to tear up, to access the American market. There's a saying, though, that the Americans are benevolently ignorant of Canada, whereas Canadians are malevolently knowledgeable about the United States. So it's a complicated relationship. A former prime minister, Pierre Trudeau, father of the current prime minister, once said that Canada living next to the United States is like sleeping next to an elephant, in which you feel every twitch and shudder on the elephant's part, no matter how well-meaning it might be. And there's certainly a lot of question right now about how well-meaning the elephant is towards its smaller neighbor.
Yeah, you certainly hope that the elephant doesn't wake up and roll on top of you as well. Jack, let me ask you, that we know there's a number of countries, there's a long list of countries that want to join the European Union. Would Canada be in a better position to join than say, Turkey, which has been trying to join for decades?
The honest truth, Brent, is yes, probably. It will be more aligned with the EU's values, which is the complications for many countries when they try and join the EU. You mentioned Turkey, decades-long process, which is completely frozen now to become an EU member country. We saw Morocco once apply. They were deemed to be too African, down on the African continent, not a European country. But also the politics are nowhere near aligned to the European Union's. In order to join the European Union, what a country has to do is to apply for a membership status, get candidate status, and then it has to open 35 chapters, they're called. Things like, is your justice system in line with the EU's justice system? Are your regulations on phytosanitary and food regulations in line with the European Union? Will you fit into the single market? There's 35 of them. You have to open them and then close them. And some of those chapters are opened and closed very quickly with countries that want to join the European Union because they're already basically aligned. And Canada, because it is pretty democratically aligned with how most European countries work, would actually probably get swift access.
Well, practically speaking, though, in the here and now, how could Canada have closer ties with the EU without becoming a full-fledged EU member?
Yeah, there's an EU-Canada free trade deal known as CETA, which has already removed like 98% odd of the tariffs that, between trade. So trade is relatively free and open between the European Union and Canada already. The political alignment and basically free movement of people so that people could move and live and work on either side, visa-free, that would be something that could be closer aligned, that would come with EU membership if that were to ever happen, and also goods and services could be quicker. But at the moment, the trade between Canada and the European Union is considered relatively good. It's in a good place. Both sides are relatively happy.
And Sean, let me bring you back. The U.S. president reportedly is very serious about Canada becoming the 51st U.S. state. With that in mind, how does the Canadian government plan to proceed with its relations with the United States?
Like, this one I just saw, I know I've seen him say it, but how could that even be? Like, surely there's like 0% chance of that actually ever happening. I thought it was just this sort of thing to whip up like some media coverage and just, yeah, you know what Trump is like, he just likes to say things and be the centre of attention, but surely there's literally no way that Canada could become 51st US state. And like he said, it's in the teens. Do you know anybody that supports that idea of that actually happening? What would be the benefits of that, if you know of any?
Well, we're in an odd situation right now, Brent, because Mr. Trudeau is a lame duck prime minister. He's announced his resignation to take effect as soon as his Liberal Party picks a successor, which is March the 9th. And that's likely to be followed very quickly by a general election in which the opposition Conservative Party is heavily favored at this moment. So it's a very unsettled situation. It's hard to predict where Canada is going to land on this. so generally speaking, it's on an issue-by-issue basis in dealing with Mr. Trump right now. And as you know, the world can change in a moment depending on what he's posting on social media or what he's asked in a press availability. So it's hard to get a good sense of where Canada U.S. relations are going in the longer term with Mr. Trump, partly because of the unpredictability of our political situation and the inherent unpredictability of Donald Trump.
And Sean, the clock, it is ticking on this deadline for these across-the-board tariffs, 25% tariff on Canadian goods. Will Ottawa and Washington come to an agreement to avert that?
That's the question of the day, and that's consuming a lot of the political discussion here right now. Again, with Donald Trump, hard to predict. Mr. Trudeau gave him at least the semblance of a win a week or so ago by re-announcing more than $1 billion Canadian worth of measures to tighten up the border. It should be said he had actually announced them some weeks before, but of course, working in Trump land, you want to make sure he has the feeling that he's negotiated a good deal, so they gave that to him. Mr. Trump then moved on again to turning Gaza into the Riviera and now into the aluminum and steel tariffs he's announced this week. So it's utterly changeable. The threats of retaliatory tariffs are still there. Yeah. And they were substantial and targeted at supposedly Republican areas of the United States, like Kentucky bourbon or Florida orange juice, to try to influence Trump by local Republicans. Not much sign of any of that happening yet. But so that's a long way of saying, who knows? Yeah. But there's still very much the threat of a trade war.
And let me ask you both before we wrap up here, and I'm going to start with you, Jack. Will Canada apply to join the European Union sooner rather than later?
No. But the fact that we're talking about this and the Trump White House means that we will, I think, see much closer Canada-EU alignment.
Okay. And Sean, you get the last word. Are you betting on a European future?
No, it'd be nice to have an EU passport, I have to say. But no, unlikely. Certainly, Canada's pushing hard to expand its trading partners, EU principally among them as well. And yeah, it was noted today in the meeting among Mr. Trudeau and the European leaders that since CETA was signed in 2017, trade has increased by more than 60%. Now it's still a distant fraction of American trade, and still France and Belgium have not fully ratified the deal, various agricultural issues, but certainly more trades. EU membership, well, let's just see. Yeah,
let's just see. We'll see if there's more business south of the border or across the Atlantic.
Yeah, cool. That's an interesting idea, but yeah, again, like, realistically, like, yeah, these things can still be worked on. Maybe not becoming an EU member fully, but just tightening those relationships, doing more trade together. It would be cool if somehow they could do some sort of like agreement for the free movement of people as well without actually becoming a member. Get a lot of high quality EU immigrants to Canada and give Canadians the option as well to go to Europe. Again, being British, I'm just sad to be left out of that conversation, man. I would love to be part of it. But yeah, tell me what you think about this and the possibility of Canada joining the EU. Thanks.